Good afternoon, everyone. Is this loud enough? Okay, that's much better. Okay. Hi, my name is Andrea. Thank you, everyone, for coming here for this panel. I'm glad you had some safe travels to get here, and I hope you enjoyed your visits to the Commonwealth and to the city of Boston.
Oh, yo soy Starling. Buenas tardes. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí. Bienvenidos a Somerville. Yo soy la alcaldesa de Somerville, Katjana Ballantyne. I'm thrilled to meet you all today. We are honored you've chosen Somerville for your tour. I hope you had a valuable trip so far. I'd like to start by recognizing Stalin Ballesteros, gracias, y all the esteemed delegates. Thank you for being here today. Thank you as well to Andrea, Brenda, and the team of USTDA, the Department of Commerce, the Webster Group, the Blue Wave for organizing this tour. We're grateful to have this time together today. Before we begin today's panel, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to Somerville and who we are as a community. The first thing you should know is that Somerville is a small city with really big goals, ambitious goals. The ambitious spirit is rooted in our history. This region played a key role in the American Revolution in 1776. The first American flag was raised for the first time just a short walk away, over here. Once this area was rural farming, Somerville experienced rapid urbanization and growth in the 20th century, largely due to new trains and manufacturing facilities. Today, Somerville is one of the most densely populated cities in the country, with more than 81,000 residents for 4 square miles. What's 4 square miles? Like, do you use miles or kilometers? So is that maybe 7 kilometers? 7 square miles, kilometers. We're also one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the US. Somerville is home to immigrants from El Salvador, Haiti, Brazil, and many countries across the globe. And our students in our public schools speak over 50 languages as the first language. I myself am an immigrant from Greece. Our community is smart, creative, and civically engaged. We have done close ties to world-class universities located nearby, like Tufts University, Harvard University, MIT, and we're known far and wide for our funky and thriving art scene. Our popular festivals add vibrancy and energy to our streets and squares. Local artists enliven our local character and economy. We're also known as a progressive community, full of activists. We believe even a small city can lead the way on some of the most pressing issues facing us globally. Given all that, it's not a surprise we've experienced significant growth in recent years. As we navigate that growth and plan for our future, we are guided by our shared values, which are outlined in the city's comprehensive plan. So we have a strategic plan. And the large shared values that we have are diversity, community, accessibility, sustainability, and innovation. As mayor, I work to ensure we center these values across our policies and processes and the city's services, and that includes public procurement. The City of Somerville's Procurement and Contracting Services Department deliver critical resources and infrastructure that sustain and advance our community. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity today to share more about our approach and learn from your experiences as well. Once again, I'm honored to welcome you all here to Somerville, and I look forward to our fruitful discussion. Now I'd like to introduce Lamas Vargas, our Chief Administrative Officer.
Thanks, Mayor. Muchas gracias, señora alcaldesa Ballantyne. Muy buenas tardes, les doy la bienvenida. Como habló nuestra alcaldesa aquí de la ciudad de Somerville, es una alcaldesa que ha hecho mucho en los últimos años y medio apenas que lleva como alcaldesa aquí en esta ciudad, y anteriormente sirvió como concejal en el Consejo de la ciudad de Somerville y también como presidente del Consejo aquí en la ciudad de Somerville. Entonces, yo estoy muy agradecida de estar aquí presente. Yo trabajo para la alcaldesa, soy la Chief Administrative Officer, también la persona encargada de lo que es las operaciones diariamente de la ciudad. Orgullosamente hija de padres colombianos también, y también... Gracias. Y también una de los otros... sorpresas más bien, pero que algo que orgullosamente nosotros estamos llena de gratitud, es que también la alcaldesa ahora tiene un superintendente de las escuelas colombiano también, el doctor Rubén Carmona. Entonces tenemos 2 colombianos aquí trabajando en la ciudad, ¿verdad? Entonces, de mi parte, les doy las bienvenidas a ustedes. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. Tenemos un panel con nosotros esta tarde, a donde le va a poder responder todas las preguntas que ustedes tienen esta tarde. Cualquier pregunta que a ustedes se les ocurra después de que se hayan ido, por favor se pueden comunicar con la oficina de la alcaldesa Ballantyne. Nosotros le podemos dirigir sus preguntas a la persona adecuada en el departamento de la ciudad. Espero que ustedes disfruten de la ciudad de Somerville, una ciudad llena de mucho orgullo y mucha gente amable de diferentes partes del mundo. Con eso le quiero que Stanley, por favor, venga, se acerque para que entonces nos diga a nosotros, al panel y a la alcaldesa, lo que se trata, lo de lo que viene, el study work que ustedes tienen aquí. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti.
Gracias.
La alcaldesa habla mejor español que yo inglés, así que yo me quedo solo con el español. Bueno, muchísimas gracias por su recepción, muchísimas gracias por tener talento colombiano ya trabajando con nosotros acá. Lo diré mucho. La principal intención de nuestra visita es poder romper culturalmente el no se puede. Siempre hay un planteamiento en los países en vías de desarrollo, y es ¿por qué no se pueden hacer cosas que vayan acorde a los tiempos globales? El solo hecho de salir y conocer, enfrentarse a otro idioma, poder dialogar con otras personas nos abre la posibilidad de interpretar un nuevo mundo en el que nosotros hacemos parte. Y esa es la invitación, que queremos conocer precisamente otras experiencias. Nos hemos llevado gratos, no solo momentos, sino también aprendizajes, como por ejemplo las apuestas alrededor de todo el proyecto de padrinazgo de las empresas grandes a las empresas pequeñas, el USTDA, el programa para promover específicamente a las pequeñas, a los small business, etcétera. Cosas que nosotros nos gustaría plantear en una colombianización, una territorialización de las apuestas globales, que digamos no solo lo hemos visto acá, sino que lo hemos estudiado en otras latitudes, pero que encontramos con gran afecto la posibilidad de que si países con el nivel de desarrollo de Estados Unidos entienden que los pequeños productores tienen un lugar importante en la economía, ¿qué ha de ser para países como Colombia, en donde el 90% de su tejido empresarial son precisamente empresas muy pequeñas, lo que el presidente Gustavo Petro ha denominado la economía popular? Por eso queremos saber también cuáles son las apuestas, los reconocimientos y aprendizajes que han tenido ustedes en ese confrontar del uso del gasto público y la compra pública para poder generar niveles de desarrollo tan bonitos como este colegio, que la verdad es muy diferente a lo que veíamos en las películas. Muchas gracias.
When a wildfire comes through a land, trees that looked strong but were hollow inside are removed. New seedlings spring up and strong trees endure. At that time, those new seedlings may seem to have little worth, but with water and attention, they can grow and be a source of sustenance. Those strong trees may rebound and still bear fruit, but there will come a time when they will not be strong enough or plentiful enough, and you will need a new source. Procurement allows the government to ensure that both the strong trees and the seedlings receive water. We encourage competition so that we do not rely only on the strong trees, but invest in the future. We increase fairness so that the roots of strong trees, the relationships that enduring businesses cultivate over time, do not stifle the growth of rising trees. When we allow corruption, convenience, and perhaps familiarity to fester, people lose faith in the government. There was a time in this state's history when corruption was a way of life. In the 1960s and 1970s, political influence drove business relationships with the government, resulting in low-quality work and accidents that threatened human life, and eroded public confidence in the government. A turning point began in 1969 when the McKee, Berger, Mansueto construction firm received an award from the state's Bureau of Building and Construction to build the University of Massachusetts' new Boston campus. Before state officials even received their proposal, the legislature formed a committee to investigate, but 2 senators asked the construction firm for tens of thousands of dollars to have the investigation end in their favor. Eventually, authorities uncovered this deal and arrested the senators. You see, it was a time when the legislature was also reactionary. So whenever a problem arose, the legislature would create a commission to investigate and handle them. In this case, the Special Commission concerning state and county buildings, later called the Ward Commission, reviewed the pervasiveness of corruption in state and county building projects. It was a commission to end all commissions because it proposed for the creation of the Office of Inspector General of this Massachusetts state. And it was the first one nationwide. And it was to act to prevent and detect fraud, waste, and abuse in the use of public funds. About 10 years later, the 1990s saw the official confirmation of the 30B law for the procurement of goods and services, and the creation of a hotline for public employees to receive advice on best practices. This office would begin to train public employees about procurement requirements and best practices under the new law as well. We have been created for such a time as this. There is a call that we answer to transform the spaces of authority in which we have been placed, to create systems and policies that will allow doors to open, bringing water into dry places and hope to frustrated places. Public procurement can be just an oversight compliance arm of the government, but using the words of John William Ward, our highest hope should be that the public would see that it's possible for individuals and private and public to care for what happens to our common life. Thank you. And so now we will be transitioning to our panel, and you're in for a treat. We have some of our best and funnest in the state. I won't tell the other people, but But we have Michael Richards, and he's the Director of Finance and Administration for the Infrastructure and Asset Management Department, and they handle a lot of the capital asset improvements. We're sitting in one of them. Then we have Adam Polinsky. He's a Senior Planner for OSPCD. They handle, mobility to be more specific. And we also are joined by Lauren Craig from the same department, and Julie Spur-Knight from our lovely Department of Public Works, and I will have to give them a special shout out for helping us get this all together in this quick time. And of course, our lovely Mayor Ballantyne. And so we will kick off with a short question. Let's see. What are the most common complaints you hear about procurement?
I guess I'll take the lead here. If you all can hear me, microphone or otherwise, I'll try to speak up. Again, thank you, Andrew, for the introduction and for you all joining. My name is Michael Richards, Director of Finance and Administration for Infrastructure Asset Management, dealing with the Capital Projects Division, responsible for building construction. Andrew mentioned this high school as part of that division, and engineering, so our horizontal construction, roadways, water, sewer, infrastructure. Formerly worked in the procurement and contracting services department for many years as well. So I'm familiar both from the practice side of implementing the procurement and also from the department side of seeking solutions through the procurement contracting office. So we often hear procurement is a roadblock. Why do we have to go through all these steps to buy something that we need? We identify a need. Why are there these laws? Why are these steps? Why are you saying no? And that's a difficult roadblock for both the practitioners, the implementers of these laws, and also for the folks that are looking to find a solution for a tangible problem in front of them. So one of those, that complaint there is largely rooted in education and understanding why we have our procurement laws, for protection for the city, protection for the taxpayers' money, to ensure that we're doing things properly to avoid that fraud, waste, and abuse that we saw in decades past. So that is a large complaint that we encounter from our departments and from other citizens when they say, when's this park going to be built? When is this road construction going to be completed? We have a lot of steps to go through, administrative hurdles to go through, and it's our role as the practitioners to work with the departments and the community to communicate those hurdles and work through the necessary laws to ensure compliance.
Thank you. You all haven't gone straight through. I will have you answer too. For you, Mayor, so Mayor Ballantyne was formerly a city councilor as well. And so now that you're on the other side of things, how has your view or understanding changed of what procurement is?
Thanks for the question. I have to say, I don't think that my views have changed. It is, the goal has been to make sure that everybody's treated equally. That's the big vision. That's the big idea. Well, in order to do that, then we have to start putting steps in place. And so being at the mayor's level, I still find myself having to explain to people we have to go through a public bidding process. It's over $10,000. Everybody has to have equal access to that. And what does that mean? They think that, for example, the federal monies we received from ARPA, which was $77 million, actually, let me rephrase that. As people think that things should be able to happen now, and they feel they should happen in the next 6 months. And we know that if you put it out for public bidding, it just takes longer. So I'll say it hasn't changed. It's, see myself in this role as also being explaining how government works. You know, it's like a government beginner's class to make sure that people know that we're trying to watch over their money carefully.
So Adam, a little slightly different, but what's one word you would use to describe procurement?
I think this is probably an opportunity to take maybe a positive spin away from some of the complaints we hear. And I would use the word strategic. As a project manager for the city of Somerville, I have had a lot of firsthand experience with having a big idea, and this community has a lot of big ideas. There's a lot of the residents of Somerville want us to accomplish and they want it now. And taking those ideas and turning them into something tangible, right? And our team is often responsible for working with everything from $10,000 worth of plastic posts on the street all the way up to multi-million-dollar streetscape projects. And so there's a wide range of things that we're responsible for. And I have found that working with the procurement team has been really important because there are a lot of questions that get asked from the people who are experts in this type of law, and sort of making sure that these processes are incorporated and turning them into something like identifying issues that we wouldn't have otherwise identified. And there's always something that wouldn't have become a problem down the road that we end up finding out ahead of the time when we're actually going out to bid and trying to get someone on board, because there's just that many more people in the room thinking about this with a trained eye that have already encountered these problems and encountered these problems on a regular basis and then can apply it directly to our problem. So from my perspective, there's a very strategic element if you're incorporating procurement into your project planning process.
So for Julie, Julie Spur-Knight, she is a new employee for Somerville, but she has so many decades, years of experience in procurement, in doing public works as well, especially on the finance side. And so from your end, especially coming here, how has your view changed of what procurement is?
So I'm going to go back to my days of being building superintendent for the town of North Reading, where that's really when I started having to work with procurement law, and I was in charge of a lot of big construction projects, and it created a lot of hurdles. Then I started to see the financial side of it, because I was also in charge of the finance end of it. That putting things out to bid creates fair competition. If you advertise it the proper way.
I think that other one might be on too.
If you advertise the proper way.
Maybe your phone.
So if you advertise the proper way and really encourage bidders to bid on your packages, vendors have to sharpen their pencils, and you can write your specifications. That's why they call it specifications in the bid package, specific to the needs of the city of town. And I think that as I consider myself an ambassador of public funds for the city of Somerville and the various other towns that I work for, that you have to do your due diligence, your planning, and really do your homework before you jump into a bid. Even though it's a lengthy process, and in the beginning when I started using procurement, it was lengthy and it was tough to learn, but now that I've learned the ropes, it's really necessary to protect public funds.
So Michael Richards has, Michael Richards, before working for the city of Somerville, he was an esteemed colleague at the Office of Inspector General, which I mentioned before. And they are an oversight agency, as I described earlier. And so Michael, can you speak about some of the misconceptions that people have in terms of what's possible and not possible within procurement?
Sure, yeah. Procurement seems to be, to many people, like I mentioned, this more nebulous roadblock of impediments and thresholds, rules, requirements that are not always readily apparent or digestible for most folks in many departments. So the role of the Office of the Inspector General is to educate procurement officials. So they have a training program through which they invite procurement officers from all across the state and private companies, contractors, to go through an educational process to understand the intricacies, the ins and outs, and how to implement all of these rules and regulations in all of our state laws, procurement laws that we deal with. So we then take that education and we bring it back to our community. And we have a procurement contracting services department who helps train other departments so we all understand this. So there may be this perception that these laws are burdensome or complicated. In practice, they may be to the layperson that doesn't have that training or doesn't have a resource or doesn't have a dedicated staff to help facilitate the implementation. So when looking at procurement from the outside or as a boots on the ground staff member who's not dealing with procurement and contracts and these statutes on a daily basis, it is confusing and it is a difficult, kind of daunting journey there. But again, that's the role that we have for the Office of the Inspector General and our Procurement Contracting Services Division to help staff navigate those rules.
So thank you for that transition to the workforce. So can you speak about what tools are available to public employees within our state?
Certainly. So I briefly mentioned there is a training program through the Office of the Inspector General. There are organizations that purchasing officers can become a part of. Because as communities, we're buying or procuring buildings or buying fire trucks or roadways, fixing their waters and sewers. These are not unique to each individual town or community. Someone else has done that for you. And so we have these resources where instead of everyone starting from scratch to say, I need to put out a bid package or solicit proposals for this solution, to find a consultant, to find a contractor, to buy this widget, someone else has done it before you most likely. So there are other resources, professional organizations. We have one in the state called MAPO. It's an acronym for the Massachusetts Association for Public Purchasing Officials. Many member communities, I think we have over 250 communities that have representation in this organization where you can share resources like bid packages, scope development, quality requirements to help select a consultant or contractor within your procurement. There are national organizations that serve the same purpose. Obviously, at a state or local level like this, when we have different procurement laws than our neighboring states or states across the country, it is a better resource to have someone that understands your restrictions and your thresholds that you're dealing with, and being able to bounce ideas off them, learn from them, learn from your peers, and share that information with each other.
So Mayor, when it comes to the training for the workforce, what vision would you say that you have in terms of the understanding of procurement, in terms of how necessary it seems, what level, or?
So my vision for our workforce is that we can move to a place that there's training, consistent training as new employees come in, that there's aids for the procurement department, that they're able to give the time and the education to our staff so they become fluent in the procurement process and learn from best practices too. That means taking a field trip someplace else, going over to the state, or opting into some of the training that was mentioned.
So this one would be for Julie. So Julie, of course, works under DPW, which means that she has, or that department specifically, you have a mixture of people who are literally on the ground. They're not tied to a computer, and they're having to get things done still. And they also have to communicate with her in the finance arm of that department as well. And so what challenge do you see as a manager when it comes to getting projects procured, but working within that environment?
I think the biggest challenge I see is the division heads want to get stuff done immediately. They'll come to me with, the threshold is anything over 10,000, we have to choose a procurement vehicle and proceed that way. And a lot of the purchases we make are over 50,000, and they have to go to public bid, which is timely. So we have run into emergency procurements that we have to do. That is the biggest obstacle for the division heads, is that they want to get things done immediately. So back to the training, I'm actually working on something for the staff, rolling out some training in-house on the methods of procurement. Because I am seeing that a little bit, that there is some misunderstanding because it is complicated, and it's different from what you're spending and what you're purchasing. If you're buying software, it's different than erecting a structure, or putting on a roof, or I'm working with the staff to try to educate them on and offering trainings through the state, so that they can become better versed on procurement law.
So the Office of the Inspector General, they, as I mentioned, their beginnings, one of the hallmarks of that organization was creating their MC PPO program. And this program is a way for procurement and even non-procurement people to get certified, but also to receive training on how to do construction bids, how to get designers, how to just do goods and services. And that's for people within schools and outside of schools as well. And you don't necessarily need to be a purchasing agent to do it. It's available to everyone. It does come at a fee though. But it is really good. And about every 3 years or so you go for recertification as well. And there are different levels depending on what your experience is. And so they didn't just create a law. They didn't just create an oversight agency. They also gave employees tools on how to navigate this. And my understanding is that for the CCE that you are doing something pretty similar in terms of creating manuals, which the OIG does as well. And there also are the organizations which Michael, I think already spoke on, like MAPO. They also have like a listserv, for instance, where people can brainstorm different solutions for procurement as they arise as well. And so I would like to transition a little bit to supplier diversity. Yes?
If I can talk to the training here.
Sure.
Sorry, so I mentioned my time before the city, I worked with the Office of the Inspector General, and that's where I got my first exposure to procurement through those courses, the MCPPO training courses. Procurement is not exactly a field that folks graduate from school and necessarily seek out. It is something that we stumble upon as part of the government wheels that we're working through. And through those courses, I was afforded this opportunity with the city here. But I think what a large lesson learned that I took from my time at the state, and then in practicing that at the local level, is that policymakers or the state agency that is in charge of creating these tests, creating these certifications, creating the interpretation of the laws, they're not practitioners themselves. And there is some that is lost in translation. As you're trickling down policies from the top level to the chief procurement officers in the trainings, then to the department level folks that are buying things, to then the people that are using it in the city. And at each of those levels, there is, I'll make up a percent, like a 10% loss of information. So when you, don't quote me on the 10%, I'm making that up. But there is some level of that you're losing that ideal policy guideline that the state is telling everyone to the person that's implementing on the ground. And that's something that was very difficult, I think, to this day, to my former colleagues to explain that while you may have an ideal policy in practice, it's only as good as the paper that it's written on. If you don't have the people below you and the training below you to educate folks, to tell them why it's important and how to use that. With that training, I think it also goes both ways, where the lawmakers that are looking at receiving input from the public or from other agencies trying to change or implement or shape these bills and these statutes, they're also not the practitioners. They don't know what it looks like on the ground. I've had 5 colleagues that have left the Office of the Inspector General's office to work in communities, former trainers at the OID, and have said this is way different in the field than it is to do something on paper, writing that policy. And I'll share a brief story. As my role with NAPO, the association, statewide association, they serve as the legislative chair. So I lobby for or against bills that are related to the procurement field that will impact our state governing statute. And lawmakers are only as good as the information that they're provided, and it's often incomplete. And we recently had in the city of Boston 2 tragic incidents leading to loss of life in trench layers. So folks that are opening the roadways to work on water and sewer infrastructure. These contractors did not have strong safety backgrounds, and it was not caught in the bid process. So as a result of this, bills were introduced to implement new restrictions and new reporting for contractors. The idea being, if we can catch that at the beginning, we can prevent future loss of life. We all agree that's a great idea. In practice, I'm reading this bill, and I hear this testimony, and I hear testimony from family members saying why this is important, and we all agree. And then it gets to my turn, and I have to talk to the senators and say, you need to kill this bill, because it was not written for the correct statute. It would have not impacted the intention of trench safety. It was written for an entirely unrelated procurement bill, procurement law, that would have totally unforeseen consequences. So it's that education two-way street of having the policies trickle down and implemented for us at the local level, but also making sure that those policies that are coming our way are fully understood, so we can actually implement them effectively.
Thank you. I'm going to have Lauren reclaim some of the time that you took So I would actually like to break a little bit and have us speak about the Transit Pass program. And it's a unique program. It doesn't have the full story that most programs do in terms of procurement, but I'll have Lauren, walk you through it. So Lauren Craig, if you can tell us about the Transit Pass program, and perhaps you can start with where the idea came from and.
Yeah, so as Andrew said, recently over the past year, the city of Somerville has launched a Transit Pass pilot program with a number of different community partners. And so we've handed out almost 2,000 free transit passes, which give our residents access to unlimited bus or subway. And eligibility is done through a number of different ways. So the way this project came about was this unique opportunity. As the mayor mentioned, we had ARPA funding, so the American Rescue Plan Act provided a lot of funds to the city specifically for programs to help populations that were economically disadvantaged by the pandemic. At the same time, there's a lot of discussions happening in the state of how can we provide more affordable access to transit. And transit here is at the state level. We have a regional transit authority. In the city, municipality, we're with our constituents, and we know how important transit is to get around our city. And so it was a unique opportunity to provide a unique benefit for new our constituents are in need of, but also contribute to state policy and sort of be a policy leader in this area by providing these transit passes and then procuring an evaluation partner to study what's the benefit of providing these transit passes, and then the opportunity of having federal funds. And so it was a really interesting procurement experience because Andrew and I went through this experience together of procurement under the difference between local laws, and so we have a local law that we're very familiar with under the state procurement law, but then there's additional requirements when you're using federal funds, which can add important regulations for us to work through, but there was also this timeline aspect of the funds were only available for a set period of time, and so how do we work with intention to make sure we're following the regulations and doing this procurement properly, but also meet the timeline in which we have available in order to spend these funds. And maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, Andrew, so but I think one thing that I've been really interested in as program manager going into this procurement is a lot of it is sole source. So this is very different than a lot of the competitive procurement scenarios you find yourselves in, because there's one provider of transit in the region. There's not competing transit providers in our area. And so in order for me to provide someone a transit pass, I only have one option to buy them from. But it's really large sole source. And so what's the process of writing a sole source justification for a large sum of money for something where there really only is one option? And so as a program manager, he brought a lot of intention to me of writing a sole source justification for me that what's the intention of this program? How could it not be justified using any other means, any other vendors? And ARPA has a community values assessment that the city did in partnership with constituents and advocates, which created a bunch of sort of guiding principles of how ARPA money should be spent. And this was more for funding, but it became actually a really important piece in the procurement process because we could pull on the community values and sort of reference the ways in which the vendors and us procuring this product was fulfilling the community values. So I think that's a nice lesson learned for me that I was able to take into future procurement projects that I'm now working on, sort of leading with our values and incorporating values into whether it's a sole source justification or a document or a request for scope.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I would have liked to ask more, but I know our time is far spent. So I would like to ask that we turn our attention to this video here, and because you can't be in Boston and not hear about the Big Dig. And so I am going to just play a little clip before we'll have Adam just end us off on speaking about the cost controls.
For WBZ documentary, Boston didn't shy away from massive engineering.
One moment. I was supposed to slow that one down.
Engineering projects to try to cut down on drive times.
The design work is the first step in the development of the Central Artery.
The Central Artery was the definitive 1950s highway behemoth, slicing through Boston, separating the North End from the city. At the same time, the Southeast Expressway was built to connect with a third massive highway called the Inner Belt.
It keeps falling apart, but we're going to spend all this money ripping through neighborhoods. I mean, if you can believe it.
Then State Representative Michael Dukakis, a fervent public transportation supporter, helped kill the idea for the Inner Belt that would have cut through Roxbury, Cambridge, and Somerville, destroying homes and displacing people. The expressway and Central Artery became invaluable, and then
this Central Artery is swiftly becoming gridlocked and threatens to strangle both Boston and the region.
So not even 30 years after the central artery, AKA the other green monster, AKA the distress way, went up, they decided to put it underground.
If we don't do something about this thing, we'll have traffic backed up to the plant for hours and hours every day. And confess that at first I was very skeptical.
Then Governor Dukakis still pushed for what would become the most expensive public works project in the country, the Big Dig. $15 billion over 15 years did give the city some beautiful upgrades. The Zakim Bridge and 93 Tunnel opened to southbound traffic today, along with the Rose Kennedy Greenway that's reconnected the city. You can see it's right over my shoulder. This is where you'll be exiting the I-93 South Tunnel. 15 years later.
Okay. We'll leave her on a cliffhanger. So the Big Dig, it actually started off with an estimate of maybe about $3 or so million. But the Inspector General, of course, found that the designer, or perhaps maybe, well, the designer, they kind of undervalued the project, anticipating that it was going to be a lot more. And so there was a bit of fraud that was involved with this one, but using this as a context, Adam and perhaps Michael, whoever would like to take it, could you end us in speaking about the biggest challenge in controlling costs for a project and how you handle it?
So there are a lot of them, long story short, because things are constantly changing. And as a learning organization, which I think Somerville is, we're always trying to do better. And that means you're accounting for a changing economy. You're accounting for changing construction costs. We had to account for a pandemic. We have to account for changing community values, right? The residents of Somerville don't necessarily want the same things they wanted 5 years ago. And so there is this sort of constant balancing act we're trying to do of giving people predictability, but also delivering more and better projects. And I'll just give you all a short story of a project that actually went very poorly from my perspective that gave me an opportunity to really learn why procurement is so important and sort of through a project that succeeded in spite of itself. We added a couple of bus lanes over on Broadway, which is a main street running through Somerville. Oh, there it is. A few years ago, and I was a very new and very inexperienced project manager given a project that I had probably no right managing, to be perfectly honest, but we had some staff turnover, and it was put on my plate. And what I learned throughout that project was that there are always going to be people, and as staff members as well, one of the best for this community, wanting more and more in the project, and it's very easy for these things to snowball. Initially, there were going to be bike lanes on this corridor, and there are further on, but the bus lanes were not part of the initial project proposal. That was something that evolved out of the community process and evolved at a time when the Boston region in general was really starting to put more emphasis on moving people via transit, buses specifically. And so we had to accommodate that change. We had to accommodate the change to essentially want to order 4 times as much red paint as we had initially thought, and figure out a way to make this all happen as we were already rolling out this the bid process. And the mayor running down me and my bosses, essentially breathing down our necks and saying, this needs to get done. This is really important before the next election to get done. And so we had to figure out how to manage all of these competing priorities. And thank goodness for Michael here, because he managed to understand where we were coming from, fit that within all of the existing laws that were existing at the time, and managed to help us deliver a really cool project that's now a centerpiece of Somerville. And so there are so many things that could make it difficult to understand like where a given project is going to go from our perspective. But I would say that being able to roll with the punches, lean on experts when you need to, and trust in the various teams, in this case specifically procurement, will go a long way in hopefully getting a better project at the end of the day.
Andrea, would you, the mayor, and the panel be willing to take some questions from the delegation with the time we have left?
Yes. Just a couple or a few. I'm so sorry.
¿Tienen algunas preguntas?
Mucho gusto, mi nombre es René Hernández, hago parte de la Agencia Nacional de Contratación Pública. A lo largo de todas las visitas nos ha hablado bastante del programa de mentores hacia las pequeñas empresas. ¿Cómo implementan ustedes este programa específicamente para los temas de procesos de contratación, de construcción dentro de la ciudad?
Speak a little bit to that. So there is an organization called BECMA. It's the Black Economic Council for Massachusetts, and they developed a council and advisory committee, but part of that is that they have also just a membership, and so they have a wide range of different businesses that they allow to network and train with each other. And so they have done a lot of work to establish relationships with the city of Boston as well as the city of Somerville, and we are a member of them, and so that's how we facilitate that. Unfortunately, we do not have someone from our Office of Economic Development who would probably be able to better answer that, but I will toss it to anyone on the panel if they feel like they can add to that.
Sure, I can add. So a few years ago, I believe our Economic Development Division worked in tandem with the Procurement Contracting Office to host a kind of a walkthrough to invite local companies to sit in. And while this is not specific to construction, it is helping them navigate our bid process. Because when you have a bid package with multiple forms, insurance requirements, bonding requirements, it is pretty daunting for companies that have not worked with a municipality or the state before to get into that public work. So we're looking to attract new bidders and help them become familiar with the process. There is that kind of barrier, that first step of how do we get them comfortable with adhering to our laws. So we worked with, again, there were multiple departments working in tandem together to advertise a seminar to invite local businesses to join us at the local assembly row facility nearby to educate them on working with the city. What does that mean? What are some of the restrictions and requirements and difficulties? And get their feedback as well to say, what has prevented you from working or submitting a bid on our projects to this point? And again, it's not restricted to construction. This could be very small services for only a handful of thousands of dollars, but everything needs a process, and everything we can do to work with community members to overcome that is in everyone's best interest.
But also as a city, we have realized that there are gaps that we can address, and we have been taking proactive steps in handling them, one of which is starting a disparity study. It's one that you may have heard that Boston did as well, and we just secured a consultant for it. And one of the benefits for it is that it does allow us to have a greater awareness of the presence and also just a supply of the minority and women and business owners that we have in the area. And it also allows us to be aware of how our policies and our systems could create barriers or just challenges that could be discouraging or just exclusive for certain vendors. And granted, we've had a different change in the national laws, and that has gotten people to feel a little anxious about the future of this type of work. But there also is a lot that can be done that can be race neutral, that would be able to provide more access to small businesses and other disadvantaged businesses as well.
¿Otra pregunta?
Muchísimas gracias. Quiero agradecerles por tener la amabilidad de compartirnos toda su experiencia, a Western Group por habernos brindado también la posibilidad pues, de estar aquí en este espacio aprendiendo de sus buenas prácticas. Mi nombre es Gisela Colón, yo hago parte de Unidad Afro, que es una organización de base de afrodescendientes en la costa caribe. Ahorita que la alcaldesa hablaba acerca de la historia de Somerville, me recuerda mucho la historia de Santa Marta, ¿no? que es mi ciudad. Yo quiero preguntarles específicamente a lo que usted se refería. Este comité económico, este Consejo Económico y Comité, aparte de la inserción que ha tenido, el crecimiento por participación en digamos, como en todo el tema de contratación pública, adicionalmente ha tenido un fortalecimiento como organización, es decir, han recibido recursos para poder fortalecerse y tener, digamos, lo que mencionaba usted ahorita. Esas cifras es importante que las haga un profesional y eso hay que dedicarle un tiempo y esa persona debe vivir de algo, ¿cierto? Entonces, ¿reciben algún tipo de recursos para fortalecer estos consejos o lo hacen de manera autónoma? Gracias.
Well, I do know that for one, they have member governance. So the city of Somerville, for instance, city of Boston, they have a membership program, and that is one way in which we fund and support them. And there are vendors as well who are part of that membership. But I also will say that I am aware of, for instance, the former president of BECMA, Segun Ndo. He is currently working for the city of Boston as well. And so there is this feedback loop of understanding the importance of organizations like that and supporting them, but also drawing them into the conversation and the table as well. And so we look forward to strengthening those bonds.
If I could just add a little bit. So the Black Economic Council, I believe, is an independent nonprofit, right? So it's a coalition, it's an advocacy group, it's a nonprofit organization that has a mission that's trying to I'd have to look it up, but we can give you the website. So to allow for more diversity in the procurement or the business aspect. So that's something this outside advocacy group is doing. So then we ask ourselves, well, what is Somerville doing? You know, to make sure that we are including in everybody. And we, in the 18 months that I've been mayor, we started the disparity study. So it's like, where are the gaps? How do we make sure that everybody has the same access? So we've done that. We've also, you know, within our staff, although this is not quite public procurement, but we have an economic development planner who works with small businesses, but specifically immigrant and women-owned businesses. We also added to our Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development a director of equity and strategic planning. Is that Luis's title? So it's to make sure what I wanted to do is make sure Somerville is changing. You can physically see the changes because we have all these buildings going up. But as we're changing, we're not leaving people behind. So we tap into what state laws do, nonprofits do, but we also have to put our money, where our values are, to make sure that what to me is very important, what my community has told me is really important, is making sure that access is available to all.
So unfortunately, we can only take one more question. Maybe during the photo you can sneak another one in, who knows. But we can take the one here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I have one question. My English is very, very bad. Okay, in Spanish. ¿Qué factores utilizan para la escogencia de los contratistas?
Can you repeat that? I can.
Sure. So I'll take this from, again, dealing with largely public construction. So we have a designer that we procure first through a qualitative process in our request for qualifications. So that is more of a best value. It's not limited to the low bid. We don't have to go with the lowest bid for designers. Because that's largely based on qualifications on their past experience with similar projects, or their ability to react to criteria that we set out that we need for our given projects. The city of Somerville, as we mentioned, is a very dense community with many miles of roads and limited areas for contractors to stage their construction, so we have some unique challenges. So we need designers, architects, engineers that are familiar with our challenges and can express those to the next phase, going out to bid for the contract. So we set out these evaluative criteria on which we will compare engineering or architecture firms on levels of expertise or their ability to react to certain challenges that we presented to them in the scope of work. And then once we receive those qualifications, we can, based on the list of criteria that we present in the bid package, and say, this is what we're interested in, and this is how you'll be evaluated. We then have a committee that reviews all those packages, reviews those criteria that we've given them to identify who is the best fit. And we take that opportunity to select 2 or 3 firms and we can interview them with additional questions to say, how would you react to this situation? What would you propose as a solution for whatever we may encounter? If it's a creative design like a park, or if it's a utilitarian design infrastructure for water, sewer infrastructure. Once we've selected the designer, they work to help build our bid package for specifications for the construction itself, which is a low bid environment. So we're setting out a budget, we're setting plans, specifications, drawings, and with the estimate provided to us, construction estimate provided to us by that architect, designer, engineer, and say, this is what we estimate, what will you bid on this project? And through the state law, again, a low bid environment, if you are qualified and meet the criteria that we set out, the low bidder is awarded that job. So we have some flexibility on the looser services, design services, or consulting services to have that evaluative criteria and not necessarily select that lowest bidder, but for finite construction or purchase of a supply or good, it is a low bid.
Tenemos tiempo para otra pregunta. El panel van a estar aquí, se van a quedar por si tienen preguntas adicionales, pero si tienen una pregunta más y después nos tomamos también una foto con todos.
Good afternoon, my name is Felipe Acevedo, I work with the agency, and thank you very much for your presentation. We've heard you several times mentioning the focus and the vision of closing gaps for public interest and creating public value. We've heard also in previous discussions. And also regarding procurement, in particular to creating the same opportunities for everybody to participate. For example, like outreaching small businesses for them to bid in the different processes. However, also regarding opportunities, one thing is for everybody to be able to bid, but then another one is to be able to actually win and be awarded the process. Because if you compare a small business with a large company or one that has a lot of experience, and you put it in the same field, it's not going maybe it's not always going to be the same level field. So we've heard from other presentations, both federally and also from other agencies, that they have different activities, like one of my former colleagues mentioned, the Mentor Project program, and also Rule of Two, and even set-asides. I'd like to know if the city of Somerville has actively pursued any of those or similar. And if I can have a technical one, it catches my attention that being such a diverse community that we saw at the school that you have recited English 3 different languages for everything. If you have any considerations as for migrant small businesses, for migrants regarding being considered small businesses and certified for being migrants. We've heard that small businesses, the most common topics we've heard is like veterans, women-based, financially challenged communities, or not communities, but vendors. If immigrants, it's also a consideration for small businesses in Somerville.
At a high level, that's why we added the 2 new staff members on our to the city employees. We have an economic planner that works with immigrants and women-owned businesses. We have the the director of equity and strategic planning, because we've said we have all these values, then it's just like, so what are you going to do about it? You know, in the strategic planning, I would say Luis, who is the director of equity and strategic planning, we're going through a process right now, and he's strategic planning, so we don't have exactly anything to share back tangibly. But on the small businesses, and this is a little bit outside procurement, I know I'm not, but it's to operate here is we've cataloged all the small businesses here and the women-owned businesses, and we celebrate them in newsletters and in social media to make sure that when our community says they want to support local businesses, that they are aware of, which are the local businesses.
Sorry, to clarify your first half of your question, so were you asking if we're creating any mentor partnership with?
Or any such program as the examples we were giving was the Mentor Project, also the Rule of Two, which I believe is kind of part of the federal program that is certain conditions when some activities can be procured by small businesses or more than 2, they can just make a set aside to just make them compete among them and make sure that it's going to be awarded to small businesses for such programs.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not familiar with anything similar to that at the local level for us. I mentioned before that in years past, we had partnered with our economic development division for more outreach for education for folks, for contractors to get into the system, so to speak. It is a careful line for us as public purchasing agents interacting with contractors or companies without showing preference, because that's our big restriction. We can't show any preference to one company over another. Obviously, we're interested in expanding on our diverse population and working with these companies to have an opportunity in the city, and we understand that part of that barrier, again, is just the education on their end to know how to navigate our systems, and information on ours to know who's out there.
Maybe last question.
We also keep in mind different restrictions like bonds and different things like that as well when it comes to smaller businesses too. and breaking of contracts. We couldn't get into that today, but nevertheless.
Okay, thank you all. Just a quick time question. Do you do anything at all to foster the population inside Somerville to associate among themselves to create new businesses? I mean, something more regarding like community growth.
Can I ask you to repeat the question? I understood it, but I need to think. So you're asking if we allow incubation to happen in the city of Somerville. We have invested since I've been in. We've had the ability to invest because of ARPA money. So what can we do to help our small businesses thrive? And so we've asked them, so through our economic development team, and I myself have gone out door knocking the squares, so to speak, and meeting with them, talking with the individual store owners. And right now, I think I've been to about 5 of the squares. What's most important to them? How do they thrive? And what you can imagine is a lot of the things that they've come up with are similar to some of the requests that if you work in a large organization. They want professional development. They want that somebody understands how to use the technology, that there's maybe some understanding in finance or soft skills training. So we've been able to allocate ARPA money and marketing also. How do they market their businesses around the city and possibly outside of the city? So our economic development team, we're putting money aside for that with our ARPA money to be able to help them address all of those things. The other thing that we have, which is we are a location of an organization called Greentown Labs. It's the largest tech incubator in the country. In the world. I think it's clean energy. Clean energy. So it is. We have the universities around us, primarily, MIT, and they are trying to incubate these ideas. So there's a location not too far from here. I think. Do you remember? Are they up to? They're certainly over 100 small incubators, and they get wraparound services in terms of how do they commercialize their idea in order to, help the climate crisis that we're in. Some of it is different kinds of cements that are used. Some of it is in battery storage, and a few of them have outgrown those locations, and we've been fortunate enough to be able to find them other space in the city of Somerville so they could grow here. Yeah.
Mayor Ballantyne, I think that's a great spot to get that retail element of procurement in terms of your interacting with your constituents about how best they can access all the programs and all procurement opportunities that you all have. So we very much appreciate all of your time. I think this was a very good discussion, especially on the deals of meeting the Commonwealth. Of course, last week, being on the federal level to hear what a city like Somerville is doing with procurement practices and with practical results that we can all sit in and see. So we want to thank you all very much for all your time here in late summer. We think this was very productive for us. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. And we will our way back to the front just so you can take a quick picture. And if there are more questions, if time allows, we can have you come back and ask. Or we'll ask there.
Pongan los dispositivos dentro de la bolsa de plástico y mientras vayan bajando me las entregan.
If you need to leave your things and then go and come back, you can. But I mean, we do have food over there as well.
Vamos abajo a tomar una foto, regresen y pueden recoger sus cosas y un carrito que le vamos a entregar.